Today we celebrate the feast of Saint Peter Baptist and his companion martyrs, Paul Miki and others. And these were some Jesuits, and Baptist was a Franciscan, among others, who had, in the 16th century, gone to Japan to preach the gospel, knowing very well that their time would be limited in their endeavor, that ultimately they would be arrested and die martyrs, which of course they did. They were crucified in Nagasaki for having preached the faith contrary to the law of the emperor. These men were inspired by the teaching of Christ, and in the case of the Franciscans, the teaching of St. Francis, who saw missionary activity as the full flowering of the Franciscan spirit, the spirit of total commitment to Christ for the rebuilding of the church, and the evangelical life of poverty and prayer and sacrifice. And they didn't count the cost. St. Francis himself, on a number of occasions, tried to get to the Holy Land in order to die a martyr, and was not granted that grace. Instead, he was given the stigmata. But from time to time, friars who did pray for the grace of martyrdom received it. And in so desiring and so praying, they're really fulfilling what our Lord promised in the Gospel when He taught the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes are an expression of the fullness of our faith lived as our Lord proclaimed it. It's not merely a moral code, sort of an elevation of the Ten Commandments to a higher level, but rather it is the blessings invoked by Christ upon those who are faithful. He says, "Blessed are those who are poor, who are meek," and all the rest. Blessed meaning happy, blessed meaning having had grace bestowed on them, blessed meaning at rest in the grace of God. Our Lord promises blessings to those who are poor and who weep and mourn, who are meek, who hunger for justice, and all the rest. But He summarizes the whole of the Beatitudes in the Beatitude of persecution. Happy are you when people hate you and drive you out and abuse you, denounce your name as criminal on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice when that day comes and dance for joy, for then your reward will be great in heaven. So you can see in this summary of the Beatitudes how it is that our Lord inverts the values of this world, so that He tells us that persecution is something that really we ought to desire, not for its own sake, but because of what it means. Because it means that we are following Christ, and the world will always hate the Son of Man. The world has no part of the Son of Man, and those who are followers of Christ have to choose Him before the world, and choose Him before those who have chosen the world. And it's a difficult thing to do, but it's something that the saints did because they were wholly dedicated to Christ, because they completely turned themselves over to Him and lived a life of prayer and poverty and penance. We live at a time when many are persecuted in their faith. In some countries, that persecution is a bloody persecution. It has been since the 20th century, early on in the 20th century. But times are grave, and as time goes on, we find ourselves more and more marginalized as Christians in the public square. We're fighting for our rights. We're fighting for the rights of marriage and for the rights of the church, the rights of the unborn. It's not a message that our impure world wants to hear. And we ought to be prepared for persecution. We ought to recognize that somehow we have got to find our peace, our consolation, our stability, the ground under our feet in the Eucharist, in the presence of our Blessed Mother, in prayer, and in the presence of God in our lives. That is what is going to sustain us always and everywhere. We cannot depend upon what the world has to offer, or even the stable institutions that we have counted on for so long. Our economy is in shambles, and it becomes ever more apparent that those who are leading our country are guessing about how to fix it. You know, we can't depend on the world and those who have solutions to offer. The only solution that we can count on is Christ and His teaching. So we need to grapple with this teaching of our Lord. We need to seek the intercession of the martyrs and ask them to give us the grace to understand the Beatitudes and find the foolishness of God to be, as St. Paul said, wiser than the wisdom of men. The righteous man, as St. Paul says in the letter to the Hebrews today, lives by faith. He lives by faith, not by vision, not by what the world has to offer, but by faith. And we will need endurance, as he says, to do God's will and to gain what is promised, but only for a little while now, a very little while, and the one that is coming will have come, and He will not delay. Whether that means for us the end of the world, or the end of our life, or the coming of our Lord in grace, our Lord will not delay, but will be with us always, even to the end of time, to sustain us in all of our needs.